Welcome to Activate Your Introvert, the weekly radio show to uncover and unlock the entrepreneurial skills in your business. In this week's show, Introvert Myth of the Week. Introverts don't have anything to say. Tip of the Week, giving feedback. And a discussion with Talissa Jensen van Rensburg. Talissa is a content creator who I met when she wrote a fantastic article about introverted PR pros for online publishing company Media Update. Just before speaking to Talissa, I was recently involved in helping a client improve the feedback they gave staff, which was an interesting discussion. Giving feedback at work is normally assumed to be a good thing. Some view it as a key part of managing staff, because all employees want feedback, don't they? Most HR practitioners suggest that feedback is important, that annual appraisals, which is just a formalised feedback method, are essential and should be supported by more regular, less formal feedback. But does feedback always help? And do leaders need to consider introverts when giving feedback? The case for all this employee feedback is that well-constructed comments help others understand their weaker and stronger points, so they can grow in confidence and skills. But I think the problem lies in three key places. There's an assumption that the feedback provider is right. Let's be honest, it's only their view. Number two, you are doing something wrong and should be corrected. And number three, that there is one best, right, way of doing something. None of those involve introverts so far, and each point, of course, is debatable. So let's just talk about three quick tips for managers. Look for the good. Get better at seeing when staff members do something well. Comment on it immediately. And maybe make a note of it so you can record it in your formal annual appraisal. Show humility. Introverts tend to value humility, so being honest about how you would improve your own performance can help. Ask questions. Self-reflection is good at helping people learn, and introverts are good at self-reflection. So ask questions rather than just make statements. What would you change next time? As a simple example. So far so good, and performance feedback is generally expected as part of a manager-subordinate role. A manager may have the right to give their view, as it's how they will judge the employee. But how much unrequested feedback do you hear from peer to peer? Unrequested feedback tends to be ego-driven and serves introverts no purpose on 2 points. Number one, it's unrequested. Doesn't help anybody, introvert or extrovert. I don't want to know what you think unless I want to know it. Number two, it tends to be ego-driven, and introverts tend to dislike strong egos. Introverts are more self-referencing than their extroverted colleagues. If you're thinking about an introvert, help them to develop their internal validation rather than focusing on external validation. That's to say, don't say, you did a great job, but help them to understand what the elements of a great job are and how great is defined in those elements. If you want an employee to remain in the business and to improve their effectiveness, there's two interesting bits of research. Employees who have managers that consistently acknowledge their good work are, according to Qualtrics, 5 times more likely to remain in the business. People who know their strengths are 8% more productive, and teams that focus on strengths every day have a 12.5% higher productivity level, according to Gallup. So that's feedback dealt with, except I do of course invite your feedback, so that's definitely requested. Now, just before speaking to Talissa, a short advert. Performance Through People is a 5-day productivity summit which is going to help you to improve the productivity of your teams and your employees. Check out the great range of speakers and get your tickets. The link is on the sleeve notes for this episode. Do let me know what tip you'd like to activate the entrepreneurial skills in your business, or what introvert myth you'd like exposed. Drop me an email, give me a call, or edit as a comment to your review on the iTunes store. I would love to hear from you. But now it's time to talk to Talissa.
welcome, Talissa.
Hi, John. Thank you for having me.
We first met, as it were, after you wrote that article, which was a really good article for Media Update. And you were surprised, I think, that an introvert or somebody shy could be in PR, which spawned a whole bit of discussion that we had off air. I want to go into that in a second, but just before we do, just really quickly, would you say, with all your new learnings, that you're an introvert or an extrovert?
I did the quiz on your site, and it turns out I'm an ambivert.
What does being an ambivert mean to you?
I think it means that to other people, you might seem extroverted and you might even seem confident, but inside, it's quite a struggle. It's, you have to psych yourself up to get ready to communicate with people or even make a phone call. So I feel with being an ambivert, it can be difficult because people will say you're an extrovert, but actually you're very much an introvert as well.
That's quite interesting then, because of course now we've got introverts going, oh, people think it's hard to be an introvert, and we've got extroverts saying the same. We've got ambiverts saying it's hard to be an ambivert. Maybe that's the overall point. There is no perfect answer to this. We are what we are, and we should learn to deal with that. But one of those things is about learning about ourselves and learning about others. What did you learn when you were researching for that article?
So originally, when I started researching the article, I was quite surprised to find out that introverts can do really well. They can do really well in the PR sector because they bring something different to the table as opposed to extroverted PR professionals.
Okay, so, and is this based on a stereotype or a label that says PR people, of course, are out there and lively and all the razzmatazz?
I think it's definitely the stereotype. I mean, a lot of PR professionals that I follow on Instagram as well, they always, when they do stories, they seem all out there. So I feel, it's a stereotype and it's like re-encouraged, with certain PR pros that we see or follow. But I think that if there's shy PR pros, they also need to be able to communicate that in a way that they feel comfortable. So let people know that you don't necessarily have to be this way to fit a specific profession.
Really interesting lesson that goes well outside of the PR profession as well. What started you on writing this article?
So in all honesty, it was me trying to get my colleague involved in a lot of conversation and always putting her in the spotlight, which she didn't like. So we ended up having a discussion about how being an introvert, what challenges they face. And I was thinking specifically about PR professionals. I was thinking, what if there's also shy PR pros like my colleague? And I was thinking, if there are, what do they bring to the table? And if they struggle to communicate or do what they want to in the profession, what are a few tips that they can actually work to improve what they do?
Love it. So you got started because you went about drawing your colleague out in the wrong way, as you would now look at it.
Definitely, because it was quite some time before she told me, this makes me feel.
I guess that you discovered some things. What did you learn?
Speaking to her, I learned that, we're all different. Therefore, we need to communicate to each other what we like, what we don't like, to also have clear boundaries. So with her, she doesn't want to be part of the conversation necessarily. I mean, if she wants to listen, that's fine, but she shouldn't feel forced to comment. I was quite taken by surprise to learn that even though I myself am not completely extroverted, something like that can make someone feel so uncomfortable.
Fascinating insight. So you started to realize that by trying to draw your colleague into the conversations, you were making her uncomfortable.
Yes.
Because sometimes introverts just want to sit and listen. And I guess unless they've got a really specific point to add.
And that's what she also explains to me, really. She will be part of discussions or give her opinion when she has something to add. But she told me, sometimes she doesn't have anything to add, like you said. So she would just listen, but not engage, necessarily. And that doesn't mean she's not part of the conversation, which is something I had to learn, because I always thought if you want to be part of something, you have to talk and be there, but not with her. That's not the case.
Yeah, that's always fascinating, because I know a number of introverts who felt guilty when their understanding was the same as yours. They had to keep on being there and talking, but they felt really uncomfortable. And yet when they stopped trying to talk a lot and they concentrated on just adding really good nuggets to the conversation, everyone thought completely different of them, and it was a much more positive experience.
Yes.
Anything else that you learned about introverts in your research in your article?
So something that I found interesting was a lady called Adrina Aaron. She's a writer for Muckrack. She actually said there were 5 things that she pointed out in her article that kind of took me by surprise about what introverts bring to the table. And that was they have the ability to focus on deeper meaning, and they're sensitive to other people's needs. They care about their subjects. They're very good at written communication, and they actually make excellent public speeches. So that was quite interesting to see how, introverts bring something extremely valuable to a company or to a brand that many brands might even overlook because, they're not outspoken or outgoing, but there's something very important that they do bring. So I was very surprised to learn that from introverts.
You highlight so many important points there. One of the common myths that I come across is that people tell me that introverts can't be good public speakers, for example, and you've just said, hey, they can be really cool. So I'm glad somebody else has discovered the same thing.
Yes.
Now that you've learned what you've learned, what tip would you offer an introvert in the PR business?
They should remember they don't have to change or adapt to be extroverted or out there to do a great job. They can be who they are, and they will bring their own very important points to campaign or to a press conference, or even when they write press releases. They shouldn't try and change that to be all out there, because what they have to offer is really important, and what they have to say is just as important. And they need to speak and communicate to other people that in the way that makes, that they're comfortable in.
Love it. From your perspective as a non-introvert, what have you learned about approaching introverts that other people could learn from as well?
So something really important that I learned, and I think other people should also take it into consideration, is that when someone is not always talking or always have something to say, or if they, in a conversation, they go quiet and they sit in their corner, you don't have to try and get them part of the conversation, because they can do it themselves. If they want to say something, they will. So I think as an extrovert, you need to understand that it's fine to let people be who they are, do what they want to. You do your thing, and if they want to be part of the conversation, they will add in. You don't have to do it for them.
That's a really important lesson. So thank you for that. Alyssa, it's been fascinating talking. Unfortunately, time whizzes through when it's a great conversation, which is always a good sign, I guess. How can listeners get back in touch with you? That your LinkedIn profile is?
LinkedIn profile is the best. And they're also more than welcome to send me an email at Media Update.
Okay, so Media Update is the company. That's mediaupdate.co.za.
Yes, we're a publication in South Africa. We focus mainly on PR, media, marketing, and social media.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time, Alyssa.
Thank you so much for having me, John. I really appreciate it.
And now it's time for Introvert Myth of the Week. Those crazy stories that I hear and you hear, but some people actually believe. The obvious myth that comes to mind after chatting to Talissa is that introverts don't have anything to say. And I think there's 2 things that lead to this assumption, which is false. Number 1, if they don't immediately answer or jump in to answer, it could be our old friend internal processing happening again. Introverts tend to process thoughts internally, extroverts externally. That is, introverts think to talk, extroverts talk to think. And that can lead to a gap getting interpreted as nothing to say. So give introverts the gift of time. Allow them to answer. And number 2, introverts tend not to say things for the sake of saying things, which came out in Talissa's example. It doesn't mean they have no view. It means their views have already been expressed, and there's no point in repeating it. Whereas some people always feel the need to add to a conversation and will repeat views that have already been expressed.
Thank you for listening to Activate Your Introvert, and I hope you've enjoyed this week's episode. I'd love to see your reviews on the iTunes store. Thank you once again, and catch up with you next week.